So welcome everyone. Good afternoon, good morning, good evening. Bienvenidos, bienvenidas a todas. Buenas tardes, buenos días. Ciao a tutte.
Buenos días.
Grazie per essere con noi.
Hi everyone, thank you for being here. So as for yesterday, we have our interpretation system, our interpreters. At the bottom of your screen, you will find the icon of interpretation. If you click on it,
Ci sarà un elenco con
a list of the languages of our meeting will open that are Spanish, English, and Italian.
Buenos días. Si necesitáis traducción, ya tenemos nuestras traductoras con nosotras. Abajo en vuestra pantalla está un mundo con el símbolo de un mundo con traducción o interpretación. Si hacéis clic sobre este símbolo, tendréis los idiomas que podéis seguir hoy. So if you need translation, at the bottom of the screen, you have the worlds with the different languages we will be using today. That's English, Spanish, and Italian. I'm going to put as well on the screen, on the chat, the links for the YouTube channel, if anyone prefers to use the YouTube channel, because yesterday some sisters had some problems. So I'll put it now on the chat. So this is the English. This is the Spanish. And here goes the Italian. So for the ones who have joined now, at the bottom of your screen, if you need translation, you find the world's symbol that has the word interpretation. You can click and a list of languages will appear, which are the languages that we'll be using today. That's English, Italian, and Spanish. Benvenuti a tutte, se avete arrivato adesso.
So again, if you just arrived, if you need translation, remember that at the bottom of your screen, you will find the icon with the word interpretation. And if you click on this icon at the bottom right of your screen, you will find the list of the languages of our meeting, Italian, English, and Spanish.
Ahora, si necesitáis interpretación, traducción, abajo de vuestra pantalla está un símbolo que dice traducción o interpretación, abajo a la derecha. Si hacéis clic, tendréis los idiomas de hoy, inglés, español e italiano. También en el chat estoy poniendo el enlace, in the chat I'm putting the link for the YouTube channel in case you have any problems to follow the session on Zoom. By email, I sent today as well the handouts that Sister Lynn has shared with us for our personal use only. So I'm going to put it on the chat as well, so that if you didn't receive it, you can open it. So the English version is there. And the Spanish one and the Italian one. So everything it's there. Thank you, Lynn, as well for your sharing with us. So on the chart, you have the 3 handouts. And people are telling us where they are as well. California, Bosnia, and Herzegovina. Thank you. Peru, Rome, Angola, Brazil, Philippines. It is amazing to have people from all over the world. Vietnam, Macau, Argentina, Thailand, Mozambique, Mexico, Kenya, España, Spain. So we have many. Côte d'Ivoire, Ivory Coast. It's beautiful to see. Myanmar, Lesotho, Malta, South Korea, Guatemala, Uganda. Oh, thank you for being with us. It's really a blessing to have people from all around the world. Australia is about to go to bed, but still with us. Thank you. India, Singapore, Venezuela, Italy, Belgium, Nigeria, Lebanon, Lesotho, Chile, France, Japan. Thank you. It's beautiful. Netherlands as well. I hope I don't leave anyone out. It's a problem. United States, Rwanda, Zambia. Thank you. Canada. Beautiful. So we have still 2 or 3 minutes to go. I will welcome again people who have arrived now. If you need translation, you know it's available in Spanish and Italian. You just need to go down to the symbol of interpretation and you will find on this symbol, which is like a world, the languages that are available today. That's Italian, Spanish and English. Buenas tardes, buenos días. Si habéis llegado ahora, bienvenidas. Si necesitáis traducción, abajo de vuestra pantalla hay un símbolo de traducción, de interpretación. Si hacéis clic sobre ese símbolo tenéis los idiomas de hoy, inglés, español e italiano. Benvenuti a tutte, buongiorno.
Welcome everyone, good morning. So if you need translation, remember at the bottom of your screen you will find the icon with the word interpretation. And if you click on this icon, you will have the list of the languages of our meeting for today that are English, Spanish, and Italian.
On a smartphone or on a tablet, if you click on the screen, you will see 3 dots at the top left. So those 3 dots, if you click on that, will give you the world with interpretation. And there you can choose the language you want. Si estáis en un teléfono o en un tablet, si tocáis la pantalla, arriba a la izquierda tendréis 3 puntos y en esos 3 puntos, si clicáis otra vez, se abre la posibilidad de escoger el mundo con la interpretación y podéis escoger el idioma que queréis. En el tablet o en el smartphone
So if you are connecting from a tablet or a smartphone, if you touch your screen, you will see 3 little white dots. And if you click on these 3 little white dots, you will have the possibility of having the access to the interpretation service and then to choose the language you want to listen to.
So we are ready to go. Welcome back, everyone, again. Thank you so much for being with us yesterday and today. Yesterday was an amazing session. I think all the grateful messages we received and all the messages you've put on the chat were witness to that. Thank you so much, Lynn, for all you've said and done and prepared yesterday. And today we continue with the theme, which is tools to accompanying new members in the congregations in an emergent reality. We all know that our world, it's in a moment of change, and so it is consecrated life. So we need to gear ourselves to be faithful to our vocation, open to the signs of times and learning new skills, to live faithfully, and also to accompany all those people that want to join us and want to discern their vocation. So as yesterday, we'll be again with Sister Lynn Levo, who I'll not introduce again, just saying that she's a sister of St. Joseph of Carondelet, and she's a licensed psychologist, lecturer, and consultant with an amazing experience in religious life, of course, and also as a psychologist and as a person who accompanies religious life and communities and novitiates and formators and sisters and brothers around the world, so that we can learn how to be the best of ourselves, and we can help each other to be who God wants us to be. Today, hopefully time will help us on that side. Sister Lynn will share with us how our communication matters. She will give us tools to a generous listening and questioning as a companion to be able to listen well. She will also share with us the barriers that interculturality brings to communication, how we can overcome them. And she will lead us also in being hope-filled people and people who are able to provide hope to others. So, Lynn, thank you so much for being with us again, and over to you.
Well, good morning or afternoon or evening or in the middle of the night, wherever you are. It's good to be back with you for this brief time, but hopefully a helpful time. You know, I just want to say one thing. You know, we've been talking about these skills, these tools for accompanying new members. But sisters, these are tools for accompanying one another. We need to be with and for one another in the same way that we're talking about being with and for new members. So accompanying one another is exactly what we need to do. And when we do it with one another, we're going to be able to do it with new members as well. And so this is part 4, for those of you who have the handout, or you can certainly listen. It's how we communicate matters. And really, I want to talk about, what does generous listening look like? And then also how to ask helpful questions, because listening is integral to accompaniment, and so is asking helpful questions. You know, I was reminded when I was thinking about this, you know, God gave us 2 ears and 1 mouth. I think that is a good indication of how we need to be more willing and able to listen more than we talk. And so think about the fact that you have these 2 ears and only 1 mouth, and yet we spend a lot of time with our talking, and sometimes not with this helpful listening that would be really a gift to all of us. So it says, you know, what I'd like to share is that listening is a basic social act. It is a spiritual act, and it is a relational act, and it is a tool for caring and loving. Sisters, you know, in our life with each other, but in our life with new members, we are called to be women who care and to love. And, you know, when you think about all of us who are online today, all of us who are listening in some fashion, what a force for good. How powerful we can be. Look at where we are. We're in every corner of the earth. What a force for good we can be as caring and loving women. And we want to start with in community ourselves and with our new members. So generous listening fosters a deeper, higher quality of being in relationship with one another. And it helps us to be more open, and it offers an opportunity to grow and become our best self. So I'd like to look at some signs or some indications of being a generous listener. I think the first one is, and we've been talking about this since yesterday, really, is about being actively present. It's not about necessarily being quiet, although there will be quiet during a conversation, but it is really avoiding distractions. Sisters, it's pretty hard to listen if you are distracted. And so if you're really going to create a space to listen, then it needs to have, not a lot of interference, a lot of noise. Perhaps the best place to listen is in a space where there is a door that you can close. So we're always talking about avoiding distractions. So your space where you listen matters. The space where you choose to listen matters. Listening is also a generous act. It's wanting to truly understand the other person. It's really trying to understand the story, her story behind her words. What do her words mean? What is the story that she's trying to tell me? And sisters, every one of us has a story. You have a story. And I hope you have someone who is able to listen to you tell your story with all that it means for you. And that's why you need to have a personal life, so that your story is able to be heard, and then you can listen to someone else's story. You want to be able to bring your best word and ideas to a conversation. And that is why we really talk about enabling, helping a person to be her best self in relationship with you. And one of the ways you do that is by being this generous listener. It's also about being curious. And sisters, this is a really important, concept. We have to leave judgment aside. Quickly we are evaluating. Is this good? Is this bad? This doesn't make sense. This is, when we really want to stay being curious and leaving judgmentalness aside. This is not just asking questions, but one question after another, but pausing and waiting, trying to understand more fully what is she saying and what is the story she's trying to tell. One of the things we want to understand in each other and in new members is what motivates her. What is underneath her behavior, even her choice of coming to religious life? Why is she here? And we don't want to make assumptions that we understand. And that is why it becomes quite clear what we're going to talk about next is that you ask good questions to understand her why, her motivation. I think this next point is so critical, sisters, is we're really called to be hospitable, to offer a place of hospitality, which helps a person, helps our sisters to feel you understand, so that she understands your compassion. And by the way, sisters, the word compassion means to feel with. It doesn't mean you take on her feelings, they become yours, but you understand what it's like for her. So hospitality doesn't require that you agree always with the person who's telling you her story, but that you are trying to walk in her shoes. You know, Pope Francis, over and over again, talks to us about communion, calling us to be women of communion. And really, what that means is this, that we are called to create alternative spaces of hospitality, alternative spaces of welcome. And so in our interactions with our new members or with each other, we open ourselves to be with each other in different ways than perhaps what's happening around us. Because often the world we live in is not hospitable, is not welcoming, and is often judgmental. So listening generously is about being open to surprise. I think, you know, this is a critical understanding that what happens in your interaction is likely to surprise you and the other person. It was interesting this morning in my prayer, which was early, but in my prayer this morning, I came in touch with the whole question of surprise. And so I think, you know, if we don't think God is with us, helping us, you know, we just have to slow down a little. And so when I was praying this morning and about surprise, this is what came to me in a short reflection. Sisters, we're never prepared for everything. As you can tell, I am very prepared for our conversation today, the best I could. But we're never prepared for everything. And that's important to remember, that we can only prepare for how we are present and able to respond, especially to the gift of surprise. So sisters, as best we can, we need to be open to surprise, to assume we don't know. And we have to, in a sense, every time we meet a person, each other in community, or every time you meet one of your new members, you have to act like it's your first meeting with them. Open yourself to who they are that day, not bring with you yesterday's conversation or a difficulty that happened a week ago. Can we let go of previous meetings and be in this moment and be open to surprise? What a gift we could be to others. And finally, when I talk about being a generous listener, it is about being vulnerable, not guarded or protective, but open to something new that can happen today in this relationship with this person. You know, I'm reminded of Isaiah 43, chapter 19, where we hear in the scripture, do not dwell on the past. See, I am doing something new. Do you not see it? And so I think we need to have a mindset. We talked about mindset yesterday. We have to have a mindset that today is a new day. And this listening is a new time. And this, I'm new. And the person I'm listening to is new. And I think if we're talking too much, if we're talking in our head, you know, even if we're not talking, then we can't be that present, listening, not guarded or protective, open to something new. And so I think we have to not keep trying to figure out what to say next. And this is a real challenge. You know, I'm a trained therapist. I'm a trained listener. And sometimes I get caught into, what am I going to say? You know, when in fact, if I just be quiet and listen, the person I'm listening to will show me what to respond to, how to be helpful to her. And so, sisters, try not to be rehearsing, going, what am I going to say? If she says this, again, trust that God is with us, that you are able, and that you will know what to say if you listen and listen well. So, we want to talk about my little phrase here. I'm going to add something to it. So the next little thing is the beginning is everything. Okay, so we're on the beginning is everything. And then you might want to add, and the ending is lasting. So I've made a little addition. And so the beginning of your conversation is everything. It's really important. And the ending is lasting. And I'm going to talk about that at the very end of our time today, the last part. The ending is lasting. So let's talk about, what do I mean when I say the beginning is everything? Sisters, when you're in a conversation with another person, it's important that you choose how to begin. This is especially important if you have invited the person to a conversation. It's your time to meet with the person this week. You have an appointment with the person. So when you are in a conversation with another, choose how you want to begin. And what you're really doing is creating a space of hospitality, and you want to open the door to what is possible with her. So you create a space. What you want to do is create the safe space we talked about yesterday. Sisters, safety is so important, that the space you invite your sister into is a safe place. And safety means where she can be herself, be respected, be welcomed, and that she can live as authentically as possible in that conversation with you. And so we're always wanting to have people be their best self. And how do we help that? This is very important. We look for the good in another. Even if you've had some difficulty, or the conversation is going to be about something that is difficult, we're going to begin with looking for the good in this person, to be a generous listener, to invite her to in this. And so you can create this hospitable place by being soft, by being open, and by being searching, desiring to hear and learn and understand. Soft, not harsh, not agitated, not angry, open, having this be a new day, meeting her for the first time, not coming with old conversations, and searching, desiring to know everything you can know about your sister and her story. And so if you want her to be soft and opening and searching, then you have to do the same. You have to create that hospitable atmosphere. And when you honor who they are, and who are they? They are a person on a journey to becoming. Sisters, that's who they are. They're a person on a journey to becoming their best self. They're not there yet, and neither are you. So one of the things to remember, I think, about ourselves first is that none of us are finished. And when I work with the novices, especially, I say to them, look, it takes a lifetime. It takes a lifetime to become all that God wants you to be. So can we be on a journey with them of becoming? And so that they will let you in and they will go deeper. They will tell us what is in their mind and heart. So we need to honor who they are, welcoming them, create this soft and open space so that they will go deeper. Sisters, the only way you can do that, or a significant choice you need to make before you begin the conversation, is clear your mind and heart of anything that came before. You have to clear your mind and heart. And I think that means you need a little bit of space. You can't talk to one person, open your door, bring in the next person, finish with her, open the door, and bring in the next person. No one can do that. And so we want to have some space, 5 minutes, 10 minutes, even more if you can, to be quiet, to let go of the previous person and your conversation, and to be open to begin again. You need to clear your mind of what was. And also, I also encourage this. Invite the Spirit of God to help you. It's not just you're doing. God's Spirit, if we invite the Spirit of God to help us be this generous listener and trusting that it's not just up to me, then I can be more soft and open and learning. So that's about being a generous listener. How do you think you're doing? Is there one thing that I talked about that you do pretty well? So you want to say, I do okay there. And is there one thing you could be better at? Sisters, focusing on one thing to be better at can change your life. We don't have to do 10 things. Sometimes it's one thing. And that's, by the way, how we accompany. What's one thing we're asking them to be better at? So now I want to talk about questioning, and questioning as a companion to listening. So when we're a good listener, we ask questions so that we can continue to listen. Let me say that again. When we're a good listener, we ask questions so we can continue to listen. I'll say this to you. If you do a lot of talking when you are sitting with one of your new members, or when we're sitting with each other, you might want to stop and say, why am I doing all the talking? If you want to understand, if you want to be able to understand her story, she needs to talk more than you. And the way you help her talk is to ask good questions to help her then be able to relax and talk. So the kind of question you ask determines what you get. You know, if you ask a question that says, that gets a yes or no answer, you're not going to have very much information. So we're going to talk about questions that open up the conversation. No one says everything you want to hear in the way you want to hear it. That's why a good question helps a person be on a journey with you. And you want to help them speak about things and go deeper and be able to be more expressive of who they are. And so we want to talk about well-crafted questions. And what that means is that you make decisions about the questions that will help the person speak more, will speak more fully. And it really, and so how you ask a question becomes really important. Sisters, I'm a trained listener. And so what I've learned to do is ask a question, and then I give the conversation to the other person. I don't want to be the one doing all the talking. I want her to be doing all the talking. And so if you're doing all the talking, you need to just ask yourself, am I not asking the best questions? That's all. You don't want to be judgmental. You just want to say, if I ask different questions, would I get different answers? And the answer is yes. So plan your questions. You know, if you have a weekly meeting with one of your sisters in the process of joining the community of accompaniment, then you want to have questions that you're aware of before she comes. It's the same thing. I know we have a leadership listening. If you're talking to one of your sisters, one of your members who is professed, and you have a meeting, you need to have a plan for why are you meeting with her? There's a reason. And so you want to be able to ask yourself, what am I trying to achieve? What's the goal of this conversation with Sister X, with Mary, or with Susan, or with Philomena? What is the reason I am asking her to come and talk to me? In the accompaniment process, many people who are accompanied, they have weekly meetings or every couple of meetings a month. So every meeting should have a purpose. You don't want to just go in there and see what happens. So what is the focus? What is the purpose of this conversations? And you ask questions related to what you want to know and what you need from that sister at that particular meeting. And so it's so important that you focus and have them and be prepared to then use those questions in a kind of progression. It's also very helpful, especially in the accompaniment process, that you share your questions that you want your sisters to reflect on. You know, we don't want to surprise them with a question that, you know, and then all of a sudden they're saying, why are you asking that? Or I didn't know that's what you wanted to know. And so especially in the accompaniment process, it's very helpful if you ask questions and then say to the sister, I'd like you to reflect on this. And when we come together, we'll talk about those questions. So don't be shy, don't be needing to surprise people. Offer the questions you want them to think about so that they can prepare and talk to you about what they really think and feel. I think knowing your purpose is, again, part of that, your goal. And it's really important to know whether you want facts. Do you want to know what happened in a factual way? Do you want to know what happened when she to her mother who was ill? That's more factual. What happened? And so it's a question of what are you really wanting to know? If one of your sisters is in studying, you might want to say, how was your class at the university? You might want to know, did she pass her class? Did she, you know, whatever sometimes you want to know facts. So you ask. Sometimes you really want to know what her experience is. And that's not factual. So what do you think about this? How are you feeling about this? What do you want? What do you need? And so those are different kinds of questions. So is it factual that you need the information? What time did she get home last night? That's a fact. So it's important to know what you're trying to achieve, what kind of information you need, and then you ask the question. And so it's important for you to know, why do I want to know this? And then you ask the questions that go with that. I think a second thing you want to do with your questioning is you want to open the conversation. When you simply ask yes or no questions, the conversation doesn't open. And so, for example, you might say, did you like the movie that we showed this morning? Did you like the movie? Well, I say yes or no. And now I have to start the conversation again. So asking a yes or no question closes the conversation. It doesn't open me to hear more from her. It kind of gets yes or no. So what if I asked, how was the movie that we saw this morning? What did you think about the movie that we saw in class this morning? When you ask a bigger question, you get a bigger answer. Most of the time, you don't want to know yes or no. You want to know her experience. Her experience. And so we ask questions that we get more information from rather than simply yes or no. And so it's really a question of being wise, asking the questions that you want to get the answer to. Another help is to ask a question in this way. And sisters, I'm going to encourage you to use these two phrases. You can use these two phrases to open a conversation with anyone. Tell me more about. Tell me more about what happened this morning. Tell me more about what happened with sister so-and-so. Or help me understand what happened in class today. Help me understand what is happening with your family. Sisters, these open the conversation. They're not judgmental. There's no judgment. There's this great desire on your part to know and understand her experience. And she can feel it. Tell me more about it. Help me understand. So I invite you, use those as often as possible when you want to create a hospitable conversation and open the door for her to tell you her story. I think you have to speak their language, your listener's language. And what that means is, sisters, I have a huge background in psychology. I'm well trained. But if you're listening, I don't use psychological language, a term that you might not understand. I don't need to do that. I can use language that expresses a psychological idea without using the psychological term. And so I use very simple, straightforward language. And so can you. You know where you're coming from. You don't have to use words that are confusing. And so if they don't seem to understand, then try rephrasing it. Say it in another way. I do speak some Spanish. I'm not fluent, and I speak some French. I'm not fluent. But when I listen to a person who's speaking to me in another language in particular, I often say to them, tell me that in another way. so that I don't misinterpret the Spanish phrase they're using or the French phrase they're using, because I'm not fluent. And so help me understand. Can you share that in another way? You know, example I might use is, you shared your mother is important to you. Tell me what you mean by your grandmother is important to you. And notice, we want her to tell the story more. I don't know what it means if she says to me, my grandmother is important to me. I don't know what she's trying to tell me, the whole story. So I say, tell me how your grandmother is important to you. Tell me more. Tell me more. I think, again, using neutral wording, we really, sisters, we want to avoid words that have, they're leading words. I use an example that maybe a leader might use, maybe not a person in a company, but how did you like the great letter I wrote? Now, sisters, I'm telling you the answer that I expect. I'm telling you to talk about my great letter. I'm really not inviting you to speak what it's like for you to receive the letter I sent this morning or I gave you. And so you really want to hear her perspective. And so we ask neutral questions. We don't put the words in there that we want to hear. And so, how did you receive the letter that I sent to the congregation? How did you receive the letter that I sent? That's a whole different question than how did you like, notice I'm telling you to like the letter, and I'm telling you that it was a great letter. Maybe it wasn't a great letter at all, but I'm not going to tell you that because you've directed me down the path. So watch how you ask a question. It's more helpful to get words like great or best or whatever out of the question, because you're pointing to the answer you want. I think we need to learn to ask questions in an order. You want to have a bigger question, that's the general question. And then you want to be able to ask more specific questions. And so it's so important that you ask a follow-up question, and then you get deeper, but you have to give them a space between the questions. And so you might ask, this morning we talked about the vow of poverty. What did you learn from our conversation? How was that conversation helping you? And then you might ask, can you be more specific? Tell me specifically what you mean when you say. So we deepen the conversation by starting with a bigger question and then getting more specific, which takes time. You can't do this in 2 minutes, you know? I think you have to focus your questions so you ask one thing at a time. Sisters, I can't tell you how many times we ask 2 questions at the same time, and then the person is trying to figure out what are they supposed to respond to. So, for example, you can't say, it's not helpful to say, how was class this morning and what did you learn? Those are 2 questions. How was class for you this morning and what did you learn? So ask the first one. What was class like for you this morning? I'm interested in knowing. Our class on poverty, our class on hospitality, our class on justice, doesn't matter. What was that like? How was that for you? And then you can ask, what's one thing you learned that you're going to take with you? So don't ask 2, 3 questions at the same time. They don't know what to do then. Notice it says, ask only essential questions. What do you really need to know? What's really important? Don't ask questions that are not important, not something you need to know. Sisters, you don't want to come across as too invasive, too asking too much. So the question here is asking essential questions, and respecting the other person's time and situation. So we ask what is essential today. Next week you might ask something different, but respecting their ability to respond to what is right happening at the moment. And don't ask questions that are about something later, so essential. This next one is very, very important, and you need to get better at this one. We all do. Don't interrupt. Now, that's a general rule. Don't interrupt. And what I mean by that is you want to listen to the full answer to your question, which might mean that you have to give the person time, and there might be some time of silence while she's trying to answer the question. So when you ask a question, you have to give enough time, and you have to let silence be a part of how she's responding, because she's probably thinking it through. Notice, if you interrupt, it's a sign of disrespect. Disrespect. And if I feel that you don't respect me, I'm not going to keep talking. I will only say very little. So, sisters, respect creates safety, creates trust. And so the basic rule is do not interrupt. Now, I'm going to talk about when it is good to interrupt. So I basically said, don't do it. And then I'm going to say, is there a time when interrupting is a good thing? And the answer is yes, in these circumstances. Sometimes, sisters, one of your sisters, and this is true if you're a leader or you're a company or in beginning with new members, a sister starts talking and talking and talking and talking, and she just doesn't stop. And it's maybe even off the topic. So sometimes, in order to slow the conversation down, it is good to say, Sister, Mary or Susan or Philomena or Juana, whatever, I'm just gonna stop you for a minute. So notice you do it in a calm way, and you say, I'd like to stop for a minute because I'm not sure that I'm understanding. That's the way. So you interrupt to slow her down, to understand better. And when you do interrupt, it's helpful for you to say something like, is this what you're trying to tell me? So you do a little summary. You do a little bit, is this what you're trying to say to me? And then if it's true, she knows you've heard her, and she can relax a little and stop talking and repeating, because a lot of times when they keep talking, they're repeating themselves. You need to let her know that you heard whatever she was trying to say. You don't have to agree with it, but you got to let her know she's heard. So there is a time to interrupt respectfully, to let her know that you've heard her, so she doesn't keep saying the same thing over and over again, or she doesn't talk about things that are not what you're trying to understand. Basically, interrupting without trying to understand is not respectful. and it doesn't help her feel safe. I think we need to learn to transition naturally. I think you want to use something in her answer to continue to ask the next question. You don't want, she's talking to you about her grandmother, and then you say, how was class this morning? If she's talking about her grandmother, you have to use something about what she said about her grandmother in order to transition to keep the conversation moving. You know, I've had people talk about very serious things. I'm talking about our community relating to each other. Somebody in the community is talking about something that's important to her, and somebody else in the community says, it's a nice day today, the sun is shining. She's talking about something that's important to her, and somebody says it's a nice day to the sun. It distracts from the conversation that was happening. So transition naturally, help say you let them know you're listening, and then you're not pushing your agenda, but you want to move to what it is important that we talk about, but you have to use what she said. And then finally, this last one, which happens more than not, sisters, this happens more than not. I hate to tell you, but we ask questions that really aren't questions. We ask questions that are really statements, and they can be aggressive and pushy. And so, you know, I think when you ask a question like, why did you meet with her? Or why did you do that? It really, and especially the word why, especially in English. Now, I don't know in Italian and Spanish and French and whatever other language, but the word why in English is very accusatory. It points a finger, and automatically people are going to be defensive. So you do want to understand why, but you don't ask why. Tell me what happened. Help me understand what happened. Help me understand your decision. Tell me about your decision not to attend the meeting. Those are all ways of understanding why without asking the word why, which really points a finger. And when I hear the word why, I start defending myself because I experience it as an accusation. You want to understand why, which is perfectly fine. You just don't want to ask it in that way. And so you say, help me understand. I'm not clear about what happened this morning. Can you say more? Listen to that opening the conversation. I'm not clear about what happened this morning in class. Can you help me understand? Can you say more? Or I'd like you to say more. And so be careful about a question that includes the word why, or asking a question that already has an answer in it. You know, did you like the movie? It has an answer in it. It has an answer in it. So help me understand what was the movie like for you. So be careful about how we ask questions, okay? The last thing I'm going to talk about, and this section is so important. So if you're snoozing a little, if you're distracted, pay attention. This one is really important. This is some new learning that's happening in business, in church, in organizations, and in community. Sisters, we want to understand the difference between perspective getting and perspective taking. So let me talk about perspective taking first. Perspective taking is I assume I understand, and I assume I understand your experience. So when I take a perspective, I assume I know what is happening with you, and I understand. So I'm saying to myself, if not out loud, I'm saying, oh, I know why Mary doesn't come to community meetings. I know why Mary doesn't talk during meals. I know, and whatever finish the sentence. You make an assumption that you understand her behavior. Sisters, sometimes or often, our assumptions are not correct. So I assume why Mary does not talk at table when she doesn't say anything. You may be accurate, and you may not be accurate at all. So instead of assumptions, perspective taking, which is based on my assumption I know, we want to shift to perspective getting. And when I want to get a perspective about why Mary doesn't talk at the dinner table, or why Mary doesn't come to community meetings, it starts with, I don't know. It starts with being intellectually humble. And here, humility is a very good thing. I don't know all that is happening with Mary. And so I don't want to assume I know. And instead, I'm going to get her perspective by doing what? By asking questions and listening intently. So sisters, I can't tell you, we all do it. We make assumptions. Some of the assumptions are based on little knowledge. Some of the assumptions are based on stereotypes, which we're going to talk about when we talk about interculturality. Sisters, don't assume you know. When you want to know something, come with a blank piece of paper. Assume you don't know. Come with great humility. I don't know everything there is to know about Mary. And I'm going to ask and listen deeply. So sisters, everything we've been talking about generous listening and asking good questions becomes critical if you really want to understand Mary and her story and not assume you know. So I ask a question here. What communication skills have you already developed? You don't come new to this. You're in the role that you're in because you have some of these skills. What will you work on in the days to come? If you chose one thing, what would you choose? Sisters, sometimes we only need to make one choice to do something differently in order to change your interaction with your sisters. So we're going to pause for a little bit here, especially to help the translators who are working very hard. So we're going to pause just for a few moments, give them a chance to take a sip of water. and then we're going to continue. It's also a time there can be read some comments in the chat as well if you want to. You know, we don't have time to answer a lot of questions, but the one I did see that I will just respond to, the question is with younger members. The question was, how often do you meet and you know, and engage in these conversations? You know, a way to think about this is, at the beginning of anything new, and remember, religious life is new to them, and religious life has a culture that's not the same as living in a family, etc. So I think at the beginning of when they first come to us, there needs to be more structure. They need to have opportunities to be together and to be with the people who accompany them. And so, you know, and you need to share information and give them an opportunity to ask the questions they need to ask. So at the beginning, you know, there is no right answer. Let me just say that. You know, there is what works for you, what works for how many people you're accompanying. You want to meet with them enough so that they can ask their questions and etc. So I think you do a combination of group work. You keep working with the group and inviting, opening the conversations and letting them ask questions. You can even ask questions that you think they want to know the answer to and answer them, even if they're not, you know. So sometimes we have to say, what if I was sitting in their shoes, what would they want to know? And then you begin to say, well, here's a question and here's an answer. You don't have to, you know. And then, of course, when you meet one-to-one, you know, you need to know, when you meet one-to-one, it's very intense. They're the only person in the room and you're looking right at them. That's intense. And so you want to ease into that. And you want to help them be with you one-on-one so they can relax and be with you. And one of the ways is if you want them to talk about something, is to give them the question before they come and they get a chance to think about it, etc. So, you know, there is no absolutely do this, only do this. And we do need to understand, though, that we gradually introduce them into a relationship with each other and with you, where they can be more open and self-disclosing. You need to know, sisters, depending on your own culture, where you're living, the world around us often says, be cautious. Keep to yourself. Don't say things that could be used against you. So it depends on the culture they come from. It depends on if they've had difficult times trusting others, you know. So I hope you hear there is no right answer, but you want to, you know, figure out how to be in relationship with them that gradually invites them to be more themselves, more self-disclosing. And it has everything to do with you setting an environment that's open and caring and kind, etc. So let's talk about intercultural communication. And what I'd like to share here is, you know, the big shift that we have made from multicultural living to intercultural living. So we've changed our language here on purpose. That when we talk about multicultural living, we really talked about living side by side. Here's me and my story, and you and your story, and you and your story. And we really weren't too interested or didn't do much to learn from each other. And here's the key word, to be influenced by each other. So I'm here, this is my culture or my tribe, and you're there, and we're separate. And we use the words, we are different, which keeps us separated. When we move to intercultural, the message is we're in this together, intercultural. And that I'm going to learn from you and you're going to learn from me. You're going to influence me and I'm going to influence you. And together we're going to learn from what happens between and among us. It's a very different understanding of difference. And sisters, the world we live in is begging for some of us to show that we can be different and in relationship. We can be different and in relationship. And I think that it's so important that we understand the idea of communion that Pope Francis has talked about. Let me define communion for you. Communion means to be one with, without losing yourself. Communion means to be one with, without losing yourself. To be one with differences. I'm going to say this again. I think we need to understand really what Pope Francis is talking about and what psychology is talking about what it means to be a human person. To be one with, without losing yourself. To be one with difference. So sisters, these women who come to us, who are unique, one of a kind, we want them to be themselves and to be in relationship with each other and with us. We don't want to wipe out differences. We want to learn how to live and respect difference. And so we come with a new mindset, a different mindset when we talk about intercultural living, intercultural communication. And so these are some blocks, some barriers that can cause frustration, anger, disappointment, misunderstanding, separation. We can say, I don't want to be in relationship with them, you know. And so we need to be aware of these stumbling blocks and to realize we have choices. Sisters, I hope you hear a theme coming from me from yesterday today. Sisters, we have choices. And we make choices if we are aware of who we learn to be and who we're called to be. Let me say that sentence again. We will be able to make better choices if we are aware of who we learn to be and who we are called to be now. So sisters, we have habits of the mind. You know, we talk about habits like working too much or eating too much, but we have habits of the mind. So what are some of the possible intercultural communication barriers? The first one is we assume that we are similar instead of different. We say to ourselves, well, people are people. This woman from this country and that woman from that country, or this woman from this tribe and that woman from that tribe, or this woman, you know, and we say, well, we're all people. And they're all here to consider religious life. We cannot assume that we are similar. You know, why is Sister Mary in religious life and why is Sister Joan in religious life? Why are they here? They're not the same. And why do we assume similarity? Because we don't know how to deal with difference. We are uncomfortable with difference. And so learning that we can be in relationship and be different is absolutely the challenge of our time, not just in community, but in the world. And it really requires that we not be defensive and that we be curious and non-judgmental. So listen to, we're repeating some of what we've been talking about. That we not be defensive, that we be curious and non-judgmental. You know, let me give you a very personal example. We have sisters in South America. And I came to deeply respect one of our sisters. And eventually we became friends across the miles. But I remember her saying to me, we are not equal. And of course, I said to her, what do you mean we're not equal? We are equal. We're sisters. And I was very defensive, especially coming from a country like the United States, where we talk about equality over and over and over again. And so finally, I said to myself, all right, calm down and ask her to tell you why she says we are not equal. And she told me. And one of the things she said is, which I had not really thought about. She said, look at the difference between us with regard to education. She said, you're a doctor. I only went to secondary school. Now, I need to understand that. It doesn't make her less than, but do you understand when she said to me, we are not equal? That was just one thing. And then she said to me, I'm not saying we are not sisters. We are sisters, and we're different. Don't wipe out the difference. Wow. Wow. So I began to look for not just similarities, but how we were different. I think there are language differences, vocabulary, idioms. You know, the idioms of a particular language, they can be quite funny if you don't understand them. You know, idioms are the way a certain language expresses something, you know. Slang, dialects, they're, you know, I think I understand, but I don't understand. You know, people use the same, they use different words for the same thing. When I was doing a little teaching in Spanish, I was trying to talk about personal boundaries, you know, that we have to have personal boundaries. Well, the people I were talking to, there was 3 different words for boundaries that they used, it depending on what country they were from. And I wanted them to understand the concept. And so we had to use multiple words sometimes, but they helped me. They say, that word doesn't work here. This is the word we use. Oh, okay. Okay, I understand. So we create problems when we cling to one word or one meaning. And so don't assume you know. It goes back to the assumptions. Don't assume you know when you say this, that everybody understands what you mean. And so you might have to ask, when I say this, what do you understand? So important that we keep clarifying. Don't make assumptions. This third one is really important, nonverbal misinterpretations. Let me talk about nonverbal behavior first of all. When we talk about nonverbal, we mean facial expressions. We mean whether you look at a person. We mean what you do with your body. We mean how close you stand or far away you move. We look at, do you look at a person? Do you have eye contact? And then a new one we're understanding has great impact is tone of voice. Tone of voice. And so what we need to know is understanding words is easier than understanding nonverbal behavior across the cultures. Let me give you an example. We have sisters in Japan, and I happen to have been in leadership. I was the congregational leader. And when I visited Japan, I noticed that there would be silence. You know, we're talking and there wouldn't be a lot of conversation, especially if the question was a difficult area. You don't assume that silence means agreement. Silence may mean, especially depending on the culture, respecting a person of authority and not saying anything because there's an underlying respecting of authority. And it may mean that they don't agree at all. So interpreting non-verbal words are a little easier at times. So how to learn correctly what nonverbal behavior really means in a given culture. Sometimes it's not about the topic, it might be about respect or formality. Having a disagreement in public is not okay in some cultures. The disagreement has to happen in private. So, sisters, learning what happens and what surrounds the words becomes critical. Let me say one thing about tone of voice. At least in the Western world, in the world I live in, tone of voice expresses about 30 or 35% of the message. So let me give you an example. If I asked you, how are you doing? Kind of an open question. And you say to me, thanks for asking, I'm fine. What if you said to me, I'm just fine? The first one, thanks for asking, I'm fine. I'm going to trust that more than I'm just fine. Listen to the tone of voice, the anxiety, or there's a little harshness in there. So pay attention to tone of voice, pay attention to the nonverbals. What we really understand is that honest communication is in the nonverbals. Words, I can say anything in words. My nonverbal behavior speaks more of the truth. So pay attention. And that does have cultural implications. The fourth point says, be aware of your pre-ideas, preconceptions, and stereotypes. I think it's really important to understand why we stereotype people. Why do I say things about Latinos? Why do I say things about Blacks in my culture, which are racist and cultural things? Why do I say those things? Because I want to reduce the unknown. And so I put people in categories to make the world more predictable. A stereotype is an overgeneralized belief. All Hispanics, all Latinos, all Blacks. There is no such thing as all Latinos, all Blacks, all Hispanics. There is no such thing. There's so much individuality. But when we generalize, it helps us try to make sense of difference. And it helps us live with myths and beliefs that we've held over and over again. And it helps us to rationalize prejudice. And sisters, that is absolutely unjust, to put people, individuals, in boxes. And so one of the things we really need to be careful with is you need to know, do you have some beliefs about different cultures? Are you unaware of your stereotypes? So a good homework is to say, do I have stereotypes? Do I have beliefs about certain people, certain groups of people? Especially people who are different than me? And when we have stereotypes, we only see pieces of who the person is. We see what fits my belief. And so we never really see them. So you want to see the whole person, not some aspect of them that you put them in a box. I think we have to be aware of the tendency to evaluate or judge. You know, sisters, if I had to encourage one thing, and I try to work with this in myself first, and in our new members as I deal with them a lot, leave judgment aside. We approve or disapprove all the time. We do it so often, we don't even know we're doing it. We judge. We say this is right and this is wrong. This is the right way. This is the wrong way. Sisters, there's so many ways to do something. I remember in my first living in community, it was a first convent, my first community. And when it came time for Christmas, the sisters, without even realizing it, said, this is how we decorate our house. This is how we decorate the house for Christmas. Is there only one way? I didn't feel included, I want you to know. So being new, being young, being new to communal living with temporary vows, I said, okay, we'll do it that way. And I never asked them to think about another way. Why? Too scary. So there's more than one way to do most things. So are we open to a different way? We have new members who have different ideas and different experiences. Are we going to be open to them? Or are we going to say to them, this is the way we live religious life, period? There's nothing can be different here. When we think our culture or our way is the right way, the proper way, then we're going to be very biased and we will not be open to looking at it differently. You have to be aware of having how closed your mind is and have the courage to risk looking at things differently. The courage to risk looking at things differently. Sisters, we can be safe and still be different. We can be safe. Everybody doesn't have to think like I do or look like I do. We can be safe and feel connection with one another and communion and still be different. And we want to understand where a person comes from, their why. We want to understand their why and how, and be open to be influenced by how they see it differently. And finally, on this topic of intercultural barriers, when you come into a relationship with a person who is different, and they all are different, it's okay to be a little on edge, or what we call moderate tension. Some tension is good. And the tension, when we say is good, we say, oh, I wonder where she's coming from. And if the tension encourages curiosity, it's good. Isn't that interesting that she would interpret what I said in this way, or she understood what we talked about in this way, or she asked this question? Can you be curious about the difference? when you're too anxious and there's too much tension, when the anxiety, is so high in you, when you're dealing with difference, you're not open, you don't learn, you're defensive, you stop listening, and you don't really focus on getting to know the person, you focus on pushing back and talking about what is right. You don't, when you're overly defensive and you're protecting and you're defending, when a new member says, could you explain why we do this way? Why do we do this way? You don't want to be so defensive and that you can't hear her question and all you do is defend. And sometimes we don't even have a good reason to defend. We simply say, it's because we do it this way. You can hear the pushback, So I want to say to you, trust yourself and God. Trust yourself that you are here for a reason. You have the role that you have for a reason. That you can be with and learn and help others. And to trust that God and the Spirit of God will help us, help you, especially in these challenging times. I think sometimes we think it's all up to me, when in fact it's up to me and you and God. And so these questions. You have lived interculturally. So which of the barriers have you personally experienced? Have you been on the receiving end of stereotypes? Have you been on the receiving end of being evaluated or misinterpreted? You know what it's like. And if you know what it's like, then you want to do everything you can to not do that to others, right? I think we can learn from these barriers when we can learn and we know what it feels like. And that helps us to want to be better in order to welcome others who are different. And sisters, if there are many ways our newer members are different, in particular, they are not younger versions of us. They have a different world that they are growing up in. They have different life experiences. And so once again, we have the call to communion, to offer spaces of hospitality where we can be one without losing oneself. You don't want to wipe out who they are, and we can be one with difference. And so let's pause for a moment, give our translators a chance to breathe. I didn't do that yesterday, but somebody helped me today to remind myself to just give them a chance. I'm reading some of the chats. They're powerful. So we're for having our last conversation, really our last input. Unfortunately, we haven't had the opportunity to go back and forth with each other. Maybe another time. So I want to talk about hope. Hope is directly related to my desire and your desire for happiness, which God has placed in each person. God wants us to be happy, not happiness because I have this thing or I did this, but this genuine sense. I think hope saves us from being selfish. Because it's always in relationship to myself and others. So what do we know about hope? I love this, just the beginning sentence. Hope is a desire for something good to happen. So I hope my brother who is ill will become better. I want something good for my brother. You know, you hear people say, I hope I win the prize. Well, the prize is probably that something good will happen with the prize, whether it's money or whatever, you know. So, sisters, our first vocation is to be human. Let me say that again. Our first vocation is to be human. And it is a human hunger for more life. That is part of what it means to be a human person, to hunger for more life. In a world that is very troubled, chaotic, unjust, conflictual, the desire for hope becomes even more important. And we need to root our hopefulness as women religious, in humanness. We have to understand that hope is a human desire. It is not just a virtue. It is a virtue. It is a theological virtue, no doubt about it. But it's also embedded in what it means to be human. It's also, we need to root our hopefulness in community, in each other. We need each other. And we need to root our hopefulness in a Trinitarian God who loves all without distinction. So we're going to talk about what does it take to be hopeful? How can a human person be hopeful when the world around us is kind of crazy and conflictual and unjust, and we're destroying the climate, the earth? How do you be hopeful? Moltmann spent 30 years, he's a German theologian. He has studied hope for 30 years. Listen to what he says. Hope is future-oriented, divinely inspired dissatisfaction with what is. Hope is future-oriented. Our new members, really all of us, need a future to believe in. One of the challenges of our time is it's not clear what the future looks like, because we're evolving. Religious life is evolving. So then we have to say, how do you be hopeful if where we're going isn't clear? And now we're going to talk about that. Notice it says hope is future-oriented, divinely inspired. This is God's desire that we what? Be dissatisfied with what is. And that those of us who hope in Christ, we can no longer put up with the reality that surrounds us because too many are suffering. So our hope, or to be hopeful, requires us to live in, with, and for the world. Hope is not about me and you and our community and this nice little thing. No, it's about in, with, and for the world. And that we can no longer put up with the reality as it is. And that's why we're here. That's what our charisms are about. That's what our ministry, that's what our life is about. There's another way. Moltmann tells us peace with God means conflict with the world. And I think that's who Jesus was. He came to say, the world that has come into being up till now, when he was there, isn't the world that God wants. We're not going to throw out the lepers. We're not going to beat up the people who've sinned. We're not going to blame people who are ill, saying that they did something wrong. You know, he challenged all of the understandings of his time, and he kept talking about love and mercy and freedom. So we want to be about what Jesus's dream was about, which is a new world. And it's our time to do whatever we can to create a new world. Now, what's really interesting is we've always had thought about hope as a theological virtue. You know, we talk about faith, hope, and charity, or faith, hope, and love. And it is a theological virtue. There's no doubt about it. I'd like to offer you a psycho-spiritual perspective. I'd like to help you to see what psychology is saying. And remember, psychology is rooted in being human. So all we're doing is adding to the theological understanding. We're not wiping out theology, we're adding. So what do we know from psychology? Hope is deeply within persons. We want to be hopeful. And it's related to three things, three big things: choice, balance, and connection. So hope What does it take for a human person to be hopeful? It's about choice. How can I be hopeful? I need to live a balanced life. And I need to be connected with others, because hope can never happen in isolation. And so, you know, sisters, some of our sisters who go in their room and shut the door and are not connected, they live in the house with us, but they're not connected. They can't be hopeful. I want to speak to the leaders and the people who are accompanying new members. Balance. You need to choose a balanced life. Leadership is not your life. Accompaniment is not your life. It's a part of your life. You need to be in relationship with others. You need to have friends. You need to have people who support you, you can go talk to. You need to have fun. You need to care for your body. You need to have a spiritual life. We cannot talk about hope if you live an unbalanced life. So what are the 4 things that psychology is saying it will help us be hopeful? What are the 4 things? The first one is choices. You need to believe that you have something to say about your life. You can't change circumstances like the weather, but you can figure out, if it's raining, how to have the meeting inside instead of outside. Sisters, we have choices. Do not be passive. Make choices every single day. And this includes some of our older women who have retired, who are not in active ministry. They have the ability to choose how to be in that moment, what kind of prayer they want to engage in, how they want to go for a walk or not. We have choices. When you say, I have no choice here, you can't be hopeful. The second thing is being in relationship. Relationship is essential for being hopeful. We need to cultivate caring, supportive relationships with one another and with others with whom we can be mutual. Sisters, gone are the days when we talked about friendship in a negative way. Friendship is critical to adult women in their life. So supporting adult relating, supporting friendship, supporting mutuality is going to be critical, or we can't be hopeful women. And so we need to be able to be present and available to others. And to understand that when someone is present and available to us, or we to them, we get a taste of God in our life, that God present and available. If we don't have a human experience of presence and availability, how in the world do we trust that God does this? And finally, I think we need to, not finally, the third point is to learn how to deal with stress and anxiety in a very personal way. How do you seek comfort and relief in healthy ways? Sometimes we overwork to blot out how we feel. Sometimes we overeat. Sometimes we withdraw and close the door and separate ourselves. Those are not healthy ways to deal with stress, anxiety. So how do you seek comfort and relief? Maybe it's going for a long walk. Maybe it's, and nature, by the way, is so healing. We spend too much time sitting indoors at meetings. Sometimes it's doing something fun. Sometimes it's going to a movie just to relax. What do you do to relax and deal with stress and anxiety in personal ways? Who do you talk to? Who do you share the challenges with? And then finally, and by the way, this fourth point is not a spiritual director talking, it's a psychologist talking, saying, Those who believe and trust in a loving God, who wants the best for each person, are likely to be more hopeful. So a faith life is very critical. And here, sisters, especially those of you who work in accompaniment, you have to help your younger members look at how they image God. If they've learned to image God as a judge and a harsh critic, they will not be able to trust that God loves them dearly. We have to help them grow up their image of God. And so, when we have an experience of hope, it impacts what we believe, it impacts our feelings, it impacts our actions. We believe we have choices, that's to be empowered. We believe we have strength, inner strength. We can feel supported. We can dream. And we can seek help when needed. And that becomes critical. We want our newer members to seek help when needed. That is not a sign of weakness. And for you leaders, it is not a sign of weakness to seek help. And maybe being here today is a good sign for our leaders who are listening, because you realize you can keep learning too. Hope does matter. And when you hope, you live differently. And you have new life. Now, the hope that we're talking about is centered in reality. We're not talking about everything is wonderful and I'm hopeful. You're talking about being hopeful at a very challenging and difficult time. So, can hope be a ministry? For leaders, can you be a hope provider for your sisters? From those who accompany younger members, can you be a hope provider? And then together, as a community, as women religious, can we be hope providers for the world? We will be hopeful if we help others be hopeful. What better ways to give life? And that's what generative means, to give life. We can mentor hope. And it requires three things as we end. Can you be available? When you're available, can you be present and open? And when you leave, can you leave a hopefulness behind? When we provide access, consistency, and sensitivity to another, we really say to them, goodness is possible. When we're present, we say goodness is possible. And we can trust, even at a difficult time, we can trust others. When you make time, share space, there's that hospitality again, and remain flexible. There's a give and take with you, not rigid. When you pay attention to what the other person is experiencing, their emotional cues, their story. And when you're able to see that someone might need some help, you might ask, are you doing okay? Do you need something? Just that, really, our availability can change a person's life. Now, you can't be available 24/7, so don't forget, we're not talking about that. We're talking about something that's realistic here. What about presence and open? It's how you're available. We talked about presence. You focused. You give quality time to the other person. You help create a safe environment where they can be themselves, safety. And that your words match your act. They trust you. Because what you say is what you do and who you are. So notice we're repeating some of those fundamentals we talked about. about trust and safety. And then finally, leaving a hopeful imprint. You really want to, with repeated involvement, for those of you who accompany anybody, really, leadership, you meet your sisters over and over and over again. And that's what we mean by repeated involvement. And every time you meet them, you try to be this welcoming, hospitable, open, flexible person. And you try to be there to help them, and so that they themselves become hopeful. Another way to say it is you keep showing up. And you try to show up with your best self. Open, listening, caring, compassionate, merciful. Sisters, the world needs us to be hopeful. Based on reality, and part of our reality is this world needs to be different. So we're going to be asking for change and difference. For sure. We're not saying keep everything the same. That's not what we're talking about. But the world needs us to be hopeful and to be hope providers. And so the last thing I would do is what we started today when I said to you, the beginning is important and the ending is lasting. So how you end a conversation, any conversation, any relationship, any interaction has a lasting effect. Sometimes it is the only thing a person remembers. So choose how you want to end. Choose how the ending will have. It may be the conversation could have been very challenging and difficult, and you choosing how it will end. Choosing to let them know you care about them, they're important. Being your best self. And so I want to say to you, I'm choosing to end our time with hope, because we need to be hopeful in the midst of all of the conflict and craziness, and to be hope providers as best we can. It was my pleasure to be with you, and now we'll do a little bit of wrapping up here. We have a few minutes. I'm appreciating the questions that come in the chat and the observations. I'll turn it back to Paula.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Lean. I will suggest as well, as you wrapped up so well, that we give ourselves 1 or 2 minutes again, not only for the translators, but for us. So from this last point you suggested on hope, how we already hope for others, and how are we invited as well to change and to be better in our behaviors, to be hope providers. So 1 minute and we will resume. I'm impressed, Lynn, by your talk and also by all the chats that it's difficult to keep up. Thank you so much for so many thank yous that you are expressing. It's really has really been a blessing, Lynn, what to say. It's difficult to follow your wise words. Thank you so much for being with us. I think you were a hope provider for us to use your words not against you, but with you. I think that so often we look at ourselves, at consecrated life, at the younger generations, and we often feel and hear and say words of despair, not words of hope, or they are different, we don't know what to do, before it was better, where are we going? And actually we forget that we are human, that human means challenge, means hope as well with dissatisfaction, as you said. And often we forget as well that it's exactly where we are, as we are, that we need to open ourselves to God and to keep looking and to allow God to change us, to consecrate us, to mold us, to keep us going. And I think you are a living example of that. So Lynn, thank you so much for your, let me say, for your age, for your experience, for your wisdom, and as well for your boldness. I think as well you said many things with a loving heart. You made us feel safe, but you didn't quiet them. And I think it's important to say them in our context and in our world, and in these worlds, how you say it, amphitheater, word theater you had here before you. So to say that many people have asked us if the videos will be available. They are all already available, but they will still be available in our USG YouTube channel. I will send you the link next week as they are ready, because now they have to be edited and made ready. I will also send you an evaluation form, which I would really appreciate, and Lynn as well, appreciate that you can answer with very easy questions, open and closed questions to make it easier. But also with Lynn, we were saying before, where to from here? What would help you more to continue deepening in these themes? So we'll be willing to listen to your suggestions, and as well watch this space, because we will continue with Lynn and with other formations, because that's one of the things that UISG has clear. We are here to help superior generals, and we are here as well to help consecrated life in this journey that God asks from us. So I think we can finish here. We can end here. It has been a blessing for all of us. Thank you so much. I will make as well the translation available in French, so that people from the French-speaking worlds can take advantage of it. And we can open our mics and express again with our lively voices our thanks. And again, Lynn, I will be in touch, and thank you so much. I think there's no words to express. Thank you as well, everyone, and the technical team and the translators and everyone that has been as well on YouTube. Lynn.
Right. Many blessings to each of you. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you.